I'd like to call to order the Bowling Green Board of Commissioners regular meeting for February 4th, 2020. I invite you to stand if you wish as Commissioner Perigin leads us in the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please pray with me, if you will. Dear Lord, please be with this group as we consider the business of the city of Bowling Green. Allow us the wisdom to make the best decisions for our wonderful community. Please also be there for our nation as we move forward. And it is in your name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Beasley Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Denning.
Here.
Commissioner Nash.
Here.
Commissioner Perigin.
Here.
Mayor Wilkerson.
Here. The first item we have is a public hearing, and the purpose is to obtain citizens' views on housing, fair housing and community development needs in Bowling Green, development of proposed activities, and review of past program performance for the Community Development Block Grant Program Year 17 Annual Action Plan. You're up, Nick.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, for letting me speak to you all tonight about the Community Development Block Grant Program. Tonight's public hearing kicks off the planning process for the Year 17 Annual Action Plan. I'll give a brief overview of the CDBG program, and then we'll open up at the end for public comment. Okay, so the city receives approximately $500,000 to $600,000 each year from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to address community development and housing issues in the community. The way the process works, every 5 years, we are required to develop a consolidated plan, which is done through a lot of citizen input and data analysis. This establishes our priority needs for funding, which currently are affordable housing, economic opportunities, and neighborhood improvements. And then each year of the consolidated plan, we must identify specific projects for funding in an annual action plan. Each project funded must meet one of three HUD national objectives. The first and most common is at least 51% of the people served by the project must be of low to moderate income, which means they are at 80% or below the area median income. Number two, prevention or elimination of slum and blight. And then number three, urgent community need, which must be tied to a presidentially declared disaster. Okay, so here's a timeline of our process. We start off with an initial public comment period, which we're in the middle of right now. It runs from January 21st through February 19th. Of course, we have our public hearing here tonight. Once this public comment period ends, we will then start drafting the annual action plan. We expect that to be done late March, and then we'll have a second public comment period for the public to review the plan. That's scheduled to run March 26th through April 24th. And then during that time period, we will have a second public hearing where we will present the annual action plan, which is currently scheduled for the April 21st Board of Commissioners meeting. So next, we'll go through a series of approvals, which is currently scheduled for May 5th with our City Commission. Next, the annual action plan will be submitted to the HUD Louisville Field Office for their approval, which is, we expect will take about 45 days. So if all goes well, we'll start implementing the annual action plan by July 1st. So here's some examples of some previously funded projects. This picture on the left is a picture of the expansion going on right now at Habitat for Humanity's Durban Estates. The city recently awarded Habitat $500,000 to install new infrastructure that will eventually result in 23 new housing units for low to moderate income families. Really excited about this project for a lot of reasons. One, though, in particular is most recently Habitat had a construction bid come in that was very favorable, so now the project's actually going to result in about 30 new housing units for low-income families, so really excited about that. Next picture on the right is actually a couple of projects that connected. We had the Census Tract 112 Sidewalks project where we installed several different sidewalks and locations in Census Tract 112 that connected the neighborhood to Lampkin Park. And then we also, which you can barely see in the back of that picture, we also had a separate walking path project at Lampkin Park, which not only connected park goers to different park amenities, but also connected the neighborhood through the sidewalks, actually through the park, so the neighborhood residents could access nearby services or employment or education opportunities. So we currently invest our funds in the BG Reinvestment Area. This is a 6 Census Tract area that contains our lowest incomes, oldest housing stock, and highest concentration of minorities in comparison to the rest of the city as a whole. We currently select one neighborhood at a time, and we make long-term investments in that neighborhood tailored to the specific needs of that neighborhood. Our current neighborhood of focus is Census Block Groups 1033, 1034. That's the area on this map that's going to be located in between roughly Old Morgantown Road and Morgantown Road. We are currently scheduled to invest approximately $1.4 million in this neighborhood over the next year or two, which will result in new affordable housing opportunities, new pedestrian facilities, and exterior property improvements. So our estimated funding for year 17 or FY21 is $600,000. This is based off of a prior 3-year funding average. We're not for sure yet what our funding is going to be, but we think this is a pretty good guess. Probably the next couple of months, HUD will notify us of what our actual funding will be. And that concludes the public hearing. If anybody's interested in submitting written comments, please send them to me by February 19th. Please address them to Nick Cook, Grants Coordinator, P.O. Box 430, Bowling Green, Kentucky, 42102, or please email them to ncs.info@bgky.org. As always, please watch for updates and for the draft plan on our website, www.bgky.org.
Mr. Cook, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that have a comment with regard to the year 17 annual action plan for CDBG? All right, thank you very much, sir. We appreciate it, and we'll close the public hearing. Do you have any awards or recognitions tonight? I know, Sue, you're going to start with.
Oh, yeah. We're going to start every meeting from now until into April, probably end of April, with an appeal to the public to go ahead and in mid-March you're going to get a letter inviting you to take the census online, and well, I shouldn't even mention the Owensboro thing, right?
Not yet.
Okay.
Let's get it down there.
Got ahead of myself there. But to go ahead, when you get that sheet of paper, go ahead and get on your smartphone, get on your tablet, get on your computer, and go ahead and fill out the census. It's good for all of us. It's good for Bowling Green. Everybody gets counted, regardless of whether you're here illegally or illegally, whether you live in an apartment, you live in a dormitory, you live in a nursing home. Everybody needs to be counted. And it's good for all of us. Bowling Green, Warren County. Take the census.
Miles, you have.
I do. Would like to, this is maybe have already gotten out in the press and around, but we were notified by the Governmental Finance Officers Association that we received their Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. I think this is the 8th year in a row we've gotten this. This award represents a significant achievement by the city. It reflects the commitment of the governing body and staff to meeting the highest principles of governmental budgeting. And in order to receive this award, the entity has to show that it satisfied nationally recognized guidelines for effective budget presentation. Some of those might be things like a policy document, financial plan, operations guide, communications devices, all kinds of categories that we go through. I think there's 14 total that they look at, and we passed again. So 8th year in a row. So congratulations to Katie and her staff. Aaron Ballou with her work on the budget presentation or the budget document, and we'll hopefully be bringing you another one soon, and we'll submit for that one too. So thank you for your support.
Equivalent to accreditation in some areas, yes.
We'd like to think so.
Yes. Congratulations. We're happy for you. But you have one more recognition, don't you, Delaney?
I do. I'd like to recognize Lieutenant Colonel Mike Delaney, that's been recognized as, give me the term again, somebody help me out. It's through the Martin Luther King Celebration Awards Month. They'll be honored on February 22nd. First State Street Baptist Church. So congratulations to Michael Delaney, our Lieutenant Colonel, Police. So
Congratulations.
Gentlemen.
All right, anyone else? Do you have any comments tonight for us, sir?
Do not, Mayor.
First item is approval of minutes from our regular meeting on January 21st, 2020, and the special work session strategic goal planning session on January 27th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Perigin, second by Beasley Brown. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections? Please call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes. Municipal Order 2020-14.
Municipal order approving the promotion of Courtney Howell to the position of Environmental Compliance Inspector in the Public Works Department.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Beasley Brown, second by Perigin. Mr. Mizel.
We had a recent vacancy in the Public Works Department and took that opportunity to kind of reshuffle the eggs in the basket a little bit. And I'd like to ask Greg Meredith to come up and make his recommendation for this new position or promotion of one of his employees.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, Mr. Mizel. Thanks for having me here today. Unfortunately, I don't think Courtney has made it back yet from her trip with Matt to Lexington. And, you know, with Matt, you never know. So, just kidding. But I'm here today to recognize Courtney and recommend that she be promoted to Environmental Compliance Inspector. Back in November of this last year, we changed the general personnel category classifications to include the inspector position. That was after the resignation of Mark Absher. We did some other personnel moves. We moved Chad Dowdy to his position, and then Nick Lawhon was promoted to Chad's previous position. So much like public safety, there was a chain reaction of that. The primary purpose of this position is to spend more time in the field with contractors and the general public to ensure that our stormwater quality regulations and standards are met. And so with this, with the inspector position, we feel like that they'll be out more with new development, with existing locations that are redeveloped, and we can watch and make sure that our stormwater is being protected. The position was initially advertised internally. We had 4 candidates that interviewed. The panel consisted of Matt Powell, Nick Lawhon, Melissa Kanzler, and Kim Ives from Human Resources. Courtney was selected for this position. She's been employed with the City Public Works Department since October of 2015 and has progressed effectively in roles with increased responsibility during that time. And also in 2019, as you remember, she was selected for the first employee spotlight recipient for our city. So she's a stellar employee. We're glad that we can keep Courtney in Public Works, and she's going to continue to be a key member of our staff. And with that, we ask for your approval for Courtney's promotion. Thank you.
Questions? Roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes, and congratulations to Municipal Order 2020-15.
Municipal order approving the probationary appointments of Tevin Bryant Barksdale and Poe May to the position of police officer in the police department.
So moved.
Nash, second by Perigin. Mr. Mizel.
We currently have some vacancies at the police department in officer positions, and tonight we have the opportunity to fill 2 of those spots. And I'd like to ask Lieutenant Colonel Penny Bowles, there she is, to come up and make recommendations for these 2 slots. Thanks, Penny.
Commissioner. In August of 2019, we started our application process for the position of police officer. We had 119 applications that were submitted. 38 applicants showed up for the POPS testing and the PAI personality assessment testing. Of the 38, 33 passed. We sent 18 to backgrounds. We interviewed 8 applicants, and tonight we are asking for the 2 positions to be filled and being recommended for appointment. We had 1 member of the ROC committee that was present for all of the interviews, and we appreciated his service being on the interview panel. And tonight, the candidates recommended for appointment are Tevin Bryant Barksdale and Poe May, and they are both here with us. Just a little bit of background on both candidates. Tevin Brian Barksdale is a graduate of Bowling Green High. Thanks, Joe. Go Purples. Yes. He then attended and graduated from the University of Tennessee at Martin, where he played football. He graduated with a degree in Health and Human Performance and has been employed with Hertz Rental Car since July of 2017. He's been in roles of increasing responsibility from manager in training to his current role, I guess now former role, hopefully, of branch manager. He also is a coach for Warren East High School and D1 Sports. Po May is a graduate of Greenwood High School in Bowling Green. She was on the honor roll, a National Honor Society member, FFA club member, and she currently works at Franklin Precision Industry at the charcoal canister section. She's also had several positions at local restaurants as a server, and most recently she became certified as a medical interpreter through the WKU Area Health Education Training Program. So we're very excited to recommend these two candidates for police officer position.
Thank you, Penny. Any comments or questions?
Let's hear it for Greenwood. The Greenwood, that's right. Always, once a Gator, always a Gator.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, with all those exciting comments, please call the roll. Yeah, I'm sorry, you guys stand up so everybody can see you. We'll get the camera back on you there, too. But we still have to vote on it, so please call the roll.
Beasley Brown? Yes. Denning?
Yes.
Nash?
Yes.
Perigin?
Yes.
Wilkerson?
Yes. Municipal Order 2020-16.
Municipal order approving the reappointment of John Sims to the Urban Growth Design Review Board.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Denning, second by Nash. Mr. Sims has finished his first term on the Urban Growth Design Review Board, which is the group that looks at the overlay districts in certain areas to ensure that they meet those design guidelines. So appreciate his service and willingness to go again. Any comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Beasley Brown?
Yes.
Denning?
Yes.
Nash?
Yes.
Perigin?
Yes.
Wilkerson?
Yes. Municipal Order 2020-17.
Municipal order waiving fees related to the use of Circus Square Park by Sky Science Festival Incorporated for the Sky Science Festival on April 24th and 25th, 2020.
So moved.
Second?
Brown, second by Nash. I don't see them here tonight. This is their last go-around on the free part of it. They'll roll into the half-price nonprofit for the next time around, as I understand. Is that correct? Any other comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Beasley Brown?
Yes.
Denning?
Yes.
Nash?
Yes.
Perigin?
Yes.
Wilkerson?
Yes. First reading of ordinance BG 2020, number 2.
Ordinance relating to budget amendment. Ordinance approving budget amendment 2 to the City of Bowling Green, Kentucky annual operating budget for fiscal year 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Perigin, second by Nash. Mr. Mizel.
As you all know, we have to amend budget from time to time. We try to hold that down to 3 or 4 a year. This is our second one for FY20. As you will see, a lot of this is some new revenue that's come in after we set budget. We also have to move money where it's needed between funds from time to time. You'll see some of that as well. And I'm going to turn it over to Katie for any comments or questions on this that you might have, and she can answer those questions.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Katie? Spelled up pretty well in our information here. Thank you very much. Please call the roll. I'm
Can I
sorry.
ask a related question that's not about that particular budget amendment? I received some communication from a citizen through social media who wondered if there was a way that we could list our budget amendments differently as they appear on the agenda. The example that he provided is that it would indicate the amount of the budget amendment, and it would indicate as to what department that it would affect, impact, or it was related to. The interest behind it was so that at a quick glance of the agenda, citizens could determine if this was something that was more of interest to them, to where they might want to dig further, as opposed to all of them just saying budget amendment.
We do keep it fairly generic because it deals with so many different categories, so many different departments. You'd be looking at potentially a really long title if we tried to do all of that, and I'm not sure how we would quite exactly do that. But we are always available and willing and ready to answer any questions anyone might have. So if they just want to give us a call, then, or send an email, and I'd be glad to provide more specific information. And of course, there's always a public copy available too in the clerk's office.
If it became difficult on the money, would it just be possible to include the departments?
We could look at that.
Yeah, if we could do that, that'd be great.
Asking if you can put more in the header?
More
the
in the,
ordinance?
what appears on the agenda, so that as it goes out, you know, he sent me an example that said a budget and finance amendment related to the Transit Authority, Historical Commission, Public Library, Fire Department, I was trying to leave out, Education, Community, and Arts, and then it listed a total amount. But so that if one of those departments was important to a particular citizen, then they would know, hey, this affects the police department, and I want to go look further about what this is. But if it doesn't affect the police department, that citizen is only concerned or only interested in the police department, they wouldn't go looking.
I'll look at that and see what we can come up with.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Any other comments? Please call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Yes, unless there's an objection, I'm going to go to item number 7, since we'll have discussion on number 6. Mr. Tavis is here for us. Second reading of ordinance BG 2020, number 1.
Burnetts Rezoning Real Estate. Ordinance rezoning a portion of a tract of land containing 83.41 acres from AG Agriculture and GB General Business to RS1B Single Family Residential, RM4 Multifamily Residential, HB Highway Business, and LI Light Industrial, located at 6309 Russellville Road, presently owned by Frank T. Wheeler Estate, care of Vicky W. Harris, with Mirsad Alik as the applicant.
So moved.
Second?
Perigin, second by Nash. This is the second reading. I think had an opportunity to discuss it last time. Nearly unanimous vote from planning and zoning. Any other comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Thank you, sir. Right now, we'll go back to first reading of ordinance BG 2020, number 3.
Ordinance amending Code of Ordinances. Ordinance amending Chapter 2 Administration, Subchapter 2-2, Board of Commissioners of the City of Bowling Green Code of Ordinances.
Moved?
Second?
Nash, second by Beasley Brown. I think you're the sponsor, Slim.
I am.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. This particular ordinance deals in two parts, and the first is really just an administrative matter, and it is bringing our current ordinance in compliance with what the state law dictates regarding filing deadlines for running for office. That was attached to this particular ordinance simply because we were already going to be in the ordinance amending it, and so it was an administrative kind of expediency thing by attaching it to this particular ordinance. So that's the first part. The second part, which I think is very important, is about when the commission votes on an ordinance. So the way that our meetings flow is that each ordinance, municipal order, or resolution that is proposed to come before the city commission first has to be read by the city clerk, which you heard happened for this particular issue. That ordinance, municipal order, or resolution then has to have a second, or has to have a first, where somebody says, yes, I'm interested in discussing this. And then it has to have a second, where 2 of the 5 people say, I'm interested in discussing this particular issue. That's important because that gets you almost to a majority. And so if there aren't 2 people that are interested in discussing it, then, you know, in the interest of moving along, then we move along. But when you have that first and second, it brings it, so to speak, in front of the commission where the entire commission can share their opinion about the issue, discussing it at length or as little as they want. Following those comments by the commission or by the public, if the public wanted to speak upon it, Under our current ordinance, the mayor or the presiding officer, in the absence of the mayor, would call the city clerk to call the roll. And every member of the commission would vote on that particular issue. And here's where the new ordinance, or the ordinance that we're discussing tonight, comes into play. What I'm proposing, this goes all the way back to, I try to look back as far back in my records, is 2005, I think is the first time that I raised this in a city commission meeting, is that state law only requires us to vote on the second reading. You have to have two readings, a first reading and a second reading, and the vote by law is supposed to occur on the second reading. You may be wondering why it matters, and I wouldn't blame you. It matters because the way the law is set up is that the first reading is supposed to give notice to the public that that particular item is being considered. So it's the very first time that anybody outside of the city commission knows that the city commission is going to be talking about that particular item. And then the commission is supposed to seek input from the public as to what their opinion on that particular matter is. In our case, that lasts about 2 weeks because we have a city commission meeting on the first and third Tuesday of every week. Sometimes it's a little longer than 2 weeks when months have an extra week in them, so it could be 3 weeks or so. But the idea is that between the first reading and the second reading, the general public, one, knows that the city commission is voting on a particular issue, and two, if they choose to, can share their opinion on it, which should form the opinions of the city commission. Our current ordinance requires that we vote on the first and the second reading. State law only requires that we vote on the second reading. Mr. Harmon, our city attorney, did a little bit of research into the area and found that most cities in the Commonwealth of Kentucky do not vote on the first reading. Some do, and then some do a mix of different things. What I'm proposing tonight, others have been involved in this discussion on an ongoing basis, is that we would only vote on a second reading so as to allow the general public to influence the decisions of the city commission. That the public would first get notice of what it is that we're talking about, and then if they want to weigh in on the issue, they can. I believe that the current process of voting on the first reading gives the impression that the commission has already made up its mind and is not interested in public input. I'm only one of 5 up here, but I can assure you that that is not my interest. I want to hear feedback from citizens, not just feedback that agrees with me. I regularly, when I get calls or emails or texts or messages with people telling me I'm wrong, I encourage them to come down to the city commission and share their opinion with other members of the commission and the general public. So it's not about only wanting to hear from people who agree with you. Once elected, our job is to ensure that we're hearing from and representing everybody and not just the people who we think either voted for us or will vote for us again. I'm not only interested in public comment, but I want to encourage public comment, and I believe not taking a vote on a first reading does that. It says, here's the issue. Share with us what it is that you think before we make a final decision. Public input is critical. It often presents a real-world perspective on the issue that we're voting on. If we're talking about something like sidewalks and where those sidewalks are going to go, the people who live on that street are going to have more of a real-world perspective of what that sidewalk is going to do to their neighborhood than it is to somebody who lives in another part of town. That's not to say that their opinion is the only one that counts, but it's to say that their opinion does count, and we would like for them to participate in the discussion with us. Allowing ample time for public input and then Carefully considering that input is crucial to the votes that I make. It doesn't mean that the majority of votes wins or the lack of majority of votes wins. It just means that I am interested, and I believe other members of the commission are interested in hearing from the citizens before a final comment is made. Public participation is essential to good government, in my opinion. And participation will enhance, not diminish, in my opinion, it will enhance the quality of the municipal order or the ordinance or the resolution under consideration. I yield the floor.
I think Dana asked me first. if you don't mind.
You can go first.
Under this suggestion or under this motion, what does the city commission, or what will they do on that first reading, or that agenda on that particular date? Just read the respective issues on the agenda? Is that all we're gonna do on that first meeting?
City clerk would still read it. The mayor would still call it. The city clerk would still read it. The mayor would ask if there is input on it, discussion on it, whether that be from the commission or from the public. And then if there is some or if there is none, he will then move on to the next item on the agenda with no vote. So it is the same thing that we're doing right now, except no vote.
And you saying based on what we presently do with each one of the items, is that one, public doesn't know, and two, if they do, we would like to get comments back to us on the particular item that they are interested in. And we don't do that now. There's not any opening for the citizens out there to respond back based on what we presently do.
I don't want to suggest that there's no opportunity for them to do so. Instead, what I believe and what I hear back from citizens is when the commission takes that first vote, they believe that the issue is resolved, that nobody is interested in what they have to say, and if somebody has something to say, it's not likely to change anybody's mind. So what I want to do is both create the appearance that the citizen has input and also create the opportunity for the citizen to have input. So even under what we currently do, they could still contact any one of us, as I know they do you, in between the first and second reading. But we would not have, by vote, staked out what our position is on that particular issue until we vote on it the second time. And I think both creates the appearance and that we're open to hearing what people have to say, and it also creates the opportunity because they won't feel like, well, it doesn't make a difference now, they've already voted on it. I'll just, move on and live with it, instead of taking a shot at sharing their opinion.
And I certainly can agree with you on that particular area because I've seen it especially in the areas of when we are dealing with real estate.
Let me interject there, Joe. On planning and zoning issues, public comments have to come through the record that planning and zoning creates for us. So lobbying us or going out and ginning up support for our position would be inappropriate. So that I don't want anybody to feel like that, it's a four-step process in a planning commission issue.
And that's
Sorry to
not
interrupt.
controlled by us, that's controlled by state law.
Yeah.
I wish it were controlled by us, but it's not. And that's controlled by state law, and we have to follow along with the rules. And in fact, the state law here says that we are not required to vote until the second reading. So again, I think it creates both the appearance and gives the opportunity for input.
That's all I've got right now.
I want to thank Commissioner Nash for putting this up for discussion. In this first year as a commissioner, I've learned a lot, and I've really enjoyed learning from our community as I'm out at community events or neighborhood meetings. And one of the things that has come up quite frequently is we will, before I go to an event or meet some citizens or some neighbors, and they will ask, I saw that you all voted on this topic, and we just found out about it after you voted on it. And so then I would have the conversation, well, we did vote on it, but the vote didn't mean anything, and really, we're going to really vote on it the next time. And then that sort of didn't make sense. Well, why are you voting on it if it's not a real vote? And so I just over and over again I'm having the same conversation with community members about, we are finding out about it after you've already voted, and that makes us feel like all the decisions are made before the public is even aware that you all are talking about it. And I don't think that's the purpose of the reason why we vote on a first reading. I think it is, to let the citizens know sort of where we're leaning. But that's just not reality, and that's not the actual impact it's having. It's making our citizens feel like we, because the reporting comes out the day after we've had our first reading. And so, and the vote, and we did vote. So then that's what's being reported, that we voted on this position. So it's making people feel like that when they find out about it, which is the day after our first reading, that we have already voted and therefore have already made up our minds. And so it is having this impact on our community where they feel like they don't get to participate in or have input in decisions that the city is having. So I do feel like it's really good to revisit this common practice that we've had here in the city and think through, is this really having the impact we were hoping it would have? And based on my experience, I think that it would be help improve our citizens' feel of being able to hold us accountable, have input in the process, and make the process more transparent, because we are putting the item up for notice, so making the public aware of it, and then making sure that we've got that time in between where we've introduced it, where we've had an opportunity for folks to ask questions about it, or we've been able to ask questions about it. Staff have been able to present a PowerPoint. I mean, there are times where we are just also receiving the information at the first reading, and sometimes we're getting new information right before we vote. I personally would love to be able to sleep on that new information. Sometimes I think my brain works if I had an opportunity to sleep on it and take a shower. Sometimes my best ideas come when I'm in the shower. And time to ask more follow-up questions to staff, be able to seek input from our citizens, and not feeling rushed and pressured right after we receive that information to make a decision right then and there immediately when we first learn of the issue. So I think both as a commissioner, I will better serve our community with more time between the time I receive the information to when I vote, but also citizens, and giving them opportunity to ask questions and learn more about it and give their opinion or input, give me more information before I make my vote. So that's why I plan to vote yes, and it may not work, it may not have the intended impact, but I see the way we currently do it having a negative impact, and I would like to try not voting on the first reading to see if this is going to help solve some of these problems of both perception and reality that our citizens don't have the chance to give input that they would like to in the future of our city.
So you're saying that on an agenda, the clerk is going to read these off, including the real estate, but we will vote on real estate items on the agenda. that correct?
Anything that's a municipal order that requires 2 readings, we would only vote on the second reading.
Excuse me, Commissioner, on the ordinances, not municipal orders. Municipal orders require just one vote. So anything that is subject to municipal order will still continue to be exactly what we're doing now. It'll be read, it'll be voted on that night. Ashley can probably help me, but we're talking about ordinances here. Ordinances probably comprise 5% to 10%, maybe what's on your agenda every week, or every 2 weeks. So this ordinance tonight is applicable only to ordinances that require 2 readings, not to municipal orders.
That's an error on my part when I was including municipal orders and resolutions. It is only related to ordinances. So if you look at tonight's agenda, Commissioner Denning,
And 4.
5, 6, and 7, we would only vote under the new rule on the second reading. Everything on the front page of our agenda, we would do business as usual.
Can I ask a follow-up question? I think he's asking are we required to vote both on the first reading and the second reading for planning and zoning decisions? Is that going to be an exception to this rule?
No, rezonings are required to be approved by ordinances, so they do require 2 readings.
Okay.
Actually, if we don't vote on them, they default to the planning and zoning recommendation.
Yeah, that's
after
true.
90
If no
days.
action is taken within 90 days of
Yeah.
final action of the planning commission, then the planning commission's recommendations are approved as a matter of law. But traditionally, normally, we've always actually brought them here for ordinance to be approved or disapproved.
May I ask a question of you, Mr. Harmon? That's only if the 90 days expires. The city commission does not have to take a vote on a zoning issue on the first reading, provided that the second reading falls within 90 days.
Yes. Yeah, the statute says, make sure everybody's clear, because zoning is a little bit different than everybody else, but the zoning does have a statute that says if the Board of Commissioners fails to take action, which means 2 votes within the 90 days, or at least 2 readings within the 90 days, thank you. With 2 readings within 90 days, with a vote on the second one, within 90 days of final action of the Planning Commission, the recommendation of the Planning Commission are become approved. You know, normally, traditionally, I don't recall ever letting one go 90 days without a vote. Normally and traditionally, we have always had an ordinance on the agenda and we've taken a vote within the 90 days. But the mayor's right. If we don't take action within 90 days, their recommendation becomes law.
Are we talking about making it to where we're going to do this after 90 days? I'm confused about why we're talking about
Well, I
that
think the
part
mayor just
right
brought
now.
that up because zoning does have a unique
okay.
statutes unique to hit with the 90-day requirement.
All zoning issues can be brought before the city commission for 2 readings and a vote within 90 days.
Yes.
With us only talking about ordinances, it varies, I'm sure, from agenda to agenda pertaining to the number, but on an average agenda, we don't have a lot of ordinances, do we?
The difference, in my opinion, is not how many we have or things, but like that, it has to do with ordinances tend to have a greater impact upon the general public than do our municipal orders. If you look at tonight's municipal orders, we hired people through municipal order, which is important. Don't misunderstand me, but generally most important to the person being hired and not, I can't think of any time in the 11 years I've served on the board that we've had anybody stand up other than a department head and give us input on someone that we've hired. Or a municipal order has to do with, the spending of money on particular equipment, whereas other ordinances or ordinances different than municipal orders tend to have the most impact on citizens' lives, I believe. And therefore, that's why I want to create both the appearance and the opportunity to really weigh in on those items if they choose to do so.
I've got a few comments to make on this one. I think it's important for us to note that this vote is not a vote for this commission. This vote is a vote for forward.
Yeah.
This particular ordinance has been in place since 1898. We have been 122 years as a community providing transparency in our vote as a commission. So that, and I hear transparency thrown around a lot. Well, this is a perfect example of how this city provides transparency. We get a lot of information given to us to read, to study, to research, and to make a decision. Now, that's our job. We weren't sent here so that 70,000 people can give us their input. We're sent here to represent the betterment of the community. When we have controversial items, there have been plenty, folks come out and give their opinion. It's just known. They give their opinion. Trying to do away with a 122-year process just gives me a little bit of angst. You know, and I want to clear this up. The motion in the second does not provide anybody with, you know, I've made a lot of motions I vote no to, I think, I don't know. But we need a motion in a second just to get it to be heard, to be talked about. So that doesn't mean that we're going to vote for or against it. But I personally like to have my vote on the record, out in the front of the community, what I feel like I'm going to do. If I have no inkling of what I think I'm going to do on the second vote, I have the right to say, I just need to get more information, so I'm going to, like, think about this one. I don't like the assumption that the general public doesn't understand the process. I can name off over the 5 years that I've been involved that there have been big community things where the first vote, the commission room is packed, social media is lit up like a Christmas tree, our voicemail and our emails and any other way that they could get to us it happens. I think we're all available. I don't think any of us are hiding behind anything. I'm not here to say that, but more is more when it comes to transparency. And I think the bottom line of what this would do and why we haven't done it for 122 years is this allows us to ride a fence. This allows us to not have studied and listened and gathered the facts, and it helps us to avoid taking a stand on really big community issues. So when somebody knows that I'm a yay or a nay on some big community issue, that doesn't mean that I'm so stubborn and dug in that we can't have conversations, and we have, and that you know, we can't help me to understand. That's where politics comes in. That's where when people say, hey, you know, this is how I feel, and that is totally taken into consideration. We're all here to do the best for the community, but I think transparency is the number one most important thing, and I think that this would remove that transparency. That's my 2 cents, and that's what I have.
May I make a full, oh, go ahead.
Your 122 years, you came up with what?
18.
Because that's how long the city's been in existence?
No, that's how long this ordinance, I have it right here, if we want the public to see it.
Yeah, please pull it up.
That's how long this ordinance has been in place, since 1898. I'll have to find it here for you.
For the city of Bowling Green?
Yes, sir. Right in my,
Predates you, Joe.
Yeah,
it does, doesn't it?
I don't remember that one.
Here is the book. Put it out there, I don't think a camera could see it, but it is
look.
moldy.
Awesome.
Yeah, we don't probably want to, you know, take those things lightly that our forefathers had put in place.
Well, I think we should take everything that we're elected to do, whether, just because something's been done
Not
for a
arguing
really
that,
long
son.
time.
Not gonna argue with
Well, you did argue with me. You brought it up.
I gave you my opinion.
Okay, I'm giving you mine.
Thank you.
This is a cover of a book. Can you show me the ordinance? Do you have a picture?
We'll get it to you.
Okay.
We'll get it to you. Just put yours here. It does exist.
I'm not doubting that it exists.
It's from 1898.
I asked
Thank you.
I asked to see it.
Well, that's all I got for you.
So I, of course, also think transparency is incredibly important, and I would never want to have an impact that would make us less transparent, and I don't intend to be any less transparent moving forward. That's a core value of mine. I don't think it has to be either or. We don't have to be less transparent or provide more time to give input. I think we can have both, and that's a choice that I think we as city commissioners make as elected officials as to how transparent we're going to be, and I don't intend to be any less transparent moving forward. But I think if you feel like this would have that impact, I would also be open, instead of removing this requirement, to vote on both. Keep that the way we've always done it, and then having work sessions, regular work sessions, where we are introducing topics that come up during work sessions and returning that extra meeting that we used to have before city commission meetings, so that then we would have another buffer for our community to learn about upcoming topics we're going to talk about, so that then we would then have that same intended impact we want to have with this ordinance, which is to make the public aware before we vote of topics we're going to talk about and give our community time to be a part of that. So I'd be happy to have that conversation if we want to talk about, let's have work sessions where we're going to introduce topics on a regular basis. And I think that would have the same impact as well, making our community feel like there's time for them to learn about the things we're going to talk about and time to learn more about it and give input, and then have the two votes after that. And I'd be happy to do that instead and keep our voting on both the first and second reading. I just feel like the fact that we've removed our work sessions and we vote on the first reading, that has created this negative impact that I don't think any of us want. So if you all are open to that, I'd be happy to go that direction.
I didn't realize that we had removed a work session.
It's my understanding that you all had regular work sessions before the city commission meeting. Is that correct? Is that you all had work sessions?
That's when we used to have meetings at 7 o'clock, and we would have a 4 o'clock work session. Well, not always, just whenever we needed one, we would use the 4 o'clock.
We could still have work sessions. I don't think anybody's against
We've
that.
had work sessions at the end of these meetings
Absolutely.
since we did away with 4 o'clock, so.
But what I'm saying is I'd be interested in having more work sessions, and where you all would bring us some items regularly that are going to be coming up more frequently, and then not voting to remove the voting on the first
Yes, I guess
reading.
my request would be that the request for work sessions come from you guys too, because we don't know what's hot and what's not. So what I think might be a routine procedural change may not be, so.
Would that be a majority vote of the commission to whether or not we needed a work session on that particular item or not?
Not I don't think we've ever, it's just been at one request that we have someone come and present information on a topic. It's been kind of the traditional means, right, Katie?
The
So
problem, yeah.
I don't think we've done away with work sessions. We just don't have them as often. We put them on at the end of these regular meetings and discuss stuff. We had a couple not too long ago where we had stacked 2 or 3 things on at the end.
We have had a significant reduction in the number of work sessions that we have had in the last 3 years that I've been on this board as compared to the previous 8 that I served.
That's most likely due to the fact the meeting time went to 4:30. And if it's either before or after, and a lot of people can't get here earlier than 4 or 4:30, so that would be up to you guys when they're scheduled, so.
Well, we talked about that previously, but the majority of the commission didn't want to change the work time. But the issue is not necessarily what time the meeting is, it's the amount of content. And in the previous 8 years that I served, many times city staff put items on the working agenda because they were items that needed more discussion. There were more moving pieces to it. For the commission to put items on the working agenda, they would need to know what the items are that are going to be on the agenda before the Thursday meeting. And that's not always possible. Many times I find out about what items are on the agenda, before the Tuesday meeting, I find out about them the previous Thursday. So
So we could request a work session based on the agenda that we get on Thursday for Tuesday, or the following meeting.
See, I guess I'm trying to make sure I understand your
I think
proposal.
work sessions were generated by staff.
some.
So you're,
Let me-
what you're
let me-
proposing, let me just clarify, so you're saying that so I get the agenda and our packet on Thursday night. So as I'm reading through it, I could then say, this particular item, I want more time. So please remove it from this agenda and make it a work session item so that we're not doing our first vote. And to do that weekend before the Tuesday of the meeting?
I'm not making a suggestion here. I'm.
Oh, I was clarifying what I thought I just heard you say. That's what I
No,
was asking.
I didn't make any suggestions. I'll go along with whatever on work sessions. It just, in my history, work sessions have come from staff when they wanted to give us more clarification on something that's kind of complicated. And
I think
Guidance on how to move in a particular
that
area.
and time constraints within a regular meeting. I mean, you all can, we could go 3 or 4 hours in a regular meeting if you all really wanted to. There's no time limit for a 4:30 meeting. You all could discuss one item for an hour or two if you really wanted to, but instead of doing that, if we think it's going to be a lengthy discussion, that's when we say, I think we need a work session on this and introduce it and give you all the information and give you more time to ask questions and discuss it and kick it around, that sort of thing. That's another reason for a work session is if it's going to be a lengthy item, a lot of discussion, then it needs to be kind of a standalone. But
what you're saying.
I'll go with either direction y'all want to go with. Doesn't matter to me.
What you're saying is every item on here could essentially be a mini work session.
It
If
could
somebody
be.
comes with a lot of questions and concerns and needs more information, we
Yeah.
always have staff here.
I
and-
will tell you though, if you all come up with questions that staff that are present can't answer, we're going to have to answer, say, we don't know, and we're going to have to get back to you. Whereas if we have a scheduled work session a week ahead of time, and we know what the topic is going to be, and we kind of have an idea of what questions are going to be asked, we can be more prepared for you. So
My
that plays into
follow-up
it too.
question is, would it be possible then, keep the voting on both the first reading and the second reading, but the meeting before, those ordinances, which are going to be first reading, could they be listed? Here's all the ordinances we know that you are going to be voting on in the upcoming meetings. And those will be listed in work session. And so that if we can be learning about it, the public can be learning about the ones that we will be voting on soon in a work session the meeting before. So that whatever, instead of us always finding out the Thursday before we have to vote on something, all these topics that we're going to talk about, it would then provide that buffer for me. I would love more time to learn about what I'm about to be voting on that first, because we do vote on that first reading. So if that would provide that space, keep our voting on the first reading and the second reading, and then meeting before, include a work session which includes all the ordinances which staff are preparing, that, to me, that would be a good compromise between the concerns Commissioner Perigin raised and the outcome we hope to have.
So how are you going to notify the public pertaining to that work session? Because that would be the only time they can contribute, isn't it? Or you giving them opportunity with that work session to gain the knowledge so they can come to a commission meeting with better understanding?
Both. I guess that would be my response is both. I mean, whether it's a working meeting or whether it's a regular meeting, we are dependent upon two things. And that is a citizen seeking out the information on their own by coming onto the city's website, and we're dependent upon the media, whether it's print, radio, television, social media, whatever it is, in sharing with the public the items that are up for discussion. The tricky part here is somehow we've spun this into an issue related to whether or not we as a commission have enough time, and I'm happy to discuss that. The intent of this is to ensure that the public perception is that we're hearing from them and that we're providing them an opportunity to participate. That's really all this is. We can talk about all the other, nuances of this, but this is really not about me and not about you and not about Charles Woosley, who was a commissioner in 1976, or who might have been an alderman 122 years ago. It's about what do we do from here going forward to ensure that the public believes they can participate and has the opportunity to participate.
So I would be happy to table this discussion and talk about, is there a way to create the meeting before our first reading, a standing work session on upcoming ordinances that we're going to discuss? I'd be happy to talk about that.
Want to schedule
an
a work
option.
session for that?
Yeah, I would like to try
It's
it.
a great idea.
Yeah.
I like the irony.
Everything doesn't need.
I'm not trying to be funny.
No.
No, yeah.
I'm gonna be
I mean,
real
when
serious.
else are,
Everything that I get as an
Good try.
ordinance in this packet on Thursday, that we have until Tuesday evening to look into, decipher, everything doesn't need to be discussed. Some of this is just so plain and simple. There are some complicated items out there. I think an occasional work session on it, but to have a work session every single meeting to go over stuff that is really simple stuff, that we've got the staff here, if we have a question, we need to say, hey, can you clarify this item, not the whole entire thing. I don't think the general public, they sent us here to make some decisions and do some work, and not to, micromanage every little word on there. I think that we do an excellent job of educating the public. I mean, an excellent job. We're very transparent as a community. I think we're very transparent as a commission. It's accessible. You're here. The agenda's out. And really, people are only passionate about the things that are going to affect them in particular, not, some other things that are just cleanups or, everything doesn't require a special work session. There are some things that I enjoy the work sessions to learn a little bit more from staff. So I think if you have a lot of questions on something, or any one of us, that we generate that over to the city manager or whoever and say, hey, I'd really like to learn a lot more about this before we vote on it.
going back to the discussion about throwing out a work session, you see something that comes out on the agenda on Thursday and trying to throw a work session together for that Tuesday is not feasible.
Right.
We have a deadline on Wednesday for a purpose, and that's to get everything to you guys by Thursday, so you have a good 4 or 5 days time to be able to look at stuff, study it. The deadline is for a good reason. We do our best to stick with that deadline. We meet on Wednesdays, agenda review meetings is what we call them. I'll look things over, and I kind of make calls sometimes. If I don't feel like an item is ready, I pull it. I don't want to ever bring you guys something that's not fully cooked or fully prepared for you all, that it's lacking information that you all can't make an informed decision on. So
And just
that's
like-
our process, and so if we want to do work sessions, that's fine with me, but those work sessions have to be planned or before the deadline, and scheduled appropriately with that agenda and that deadline
I
being
follow
met.
up on that. I think
Does that
we
make
have to
sense?
put some faith in the staff that they know what is going to be
Oh,
an
this
issue
isn't
for
a
the
staff
community.
issue.
No, it's not about the staff. I'm just saying that, like Brent did a work session on the case law about signs in communities. We learned a lot about that. We did, and that was something that's coming, that we really need to get that right. And so having that work session and learning, had he not brought that to us, then we would be looking at staring that down at our retreat and not having the background and the information and all of those things. That is a complicated issue that we need as a group to give guidance and direction. Those are the kinds of things that I would like to see us have work sessions on that are going to affect the entire community, not a budget amendment or some other simple thing that is easily decided and taken care of. It's that thing that's coming that's complicated that we all need to really understand in a deep way.
So I don't disagree with anything you're saying,
Thank you.
but I don't, what I'm trying to understand is, I guess, maybe relevant towards this particular issue, because the way it happens now is that the first reading is the first notice to the public of the topic we are going to have an official vote on in 2 weeks, right? That's the purpose of the first reading, to make the public aware of this topic. Unfortunately, we're not making the public aware and then voting on the second reading. We are making the public aware and then immediately voting that same meeting, the night that we are making the public aware. So then the media then, once they, just like we are, gathering the information, they can't report on it before the first reading, right? Because that's when we have the public, we give the public the information about the topic. So then the media then shares this is their duty as the media, is to make the public aware of what, what our government's decisions that they're making and what we're going to be, the decisions we're going to make. So the next day after our first reading is when most of the public will learn about the decisions we're going to make. And because we're voting the day before most of the public learns about the topic, it is having this impact where people feel like before they even are made aware of a topic, we've already made up our minds. It's having this negative impact where the public feels like the decisions have already been made behind closed doors before they've learned about it. And so it's having the impact of making it seem like we aren't transparent. So I guess I am with you that the goal is to make us more transparent. And I'm seeing that even though this might not be the intention of voting on the first reading to be less transparent, it is making the general public feel like there isn't that transparency, because surely we've already made up our minds without even making the public aware. And so it's having the impact of that city government isn't transparent. So it's my goal in having us introduce it to the public, that first reading, and so that they're learning about it before we vote. My hope is that it creates the opportunity for the public to feel like they have input or made aware of it before we've already made up our minds, so that it makes us more, and it gives us the appearance of more transparency. So I think that's both of our goal.
Seeing it two different ways.
Yes, so
that's good. That's what government should do.
Yes, so that's my sort of holdup, is that I understand that that's the purpose of having the 2 readings, is to make it more transparent, but I have found that the impact has made it to where we are less transparent. And so for me, the impact is the impact. And so I think that's what I have to make my decision on, is not necessarily intent, but what's the impact it's having.
Absolutely. So I'm just one vote, and I'm just sharing my opinion on this particular. The public does get notice of what's on our agenda, basically through the media, on the Thursday that we also get the agenda. I follow Wes, and he puts in the newspaper what's coming and what to expect and all those kinds of things. And they also know, if it's important to them, they're going to know that it's coming, more than likely, and they can see the agenda online, because we're very transparent. As soon as we get it, the public gets it. Not any time, we don't delay that. So, like I say, I'm one vote. I don't get that feedback. I've not gotten that feedback in the 5 years I've been on this commission. That, I have been told after even the second reading that you already had your mind made up, which is wrong, because I hadn't. I do carefully consider each and every item. I want the public to know how I feel about certain things, so I like the vote. But again, I'm one vote, and there's 5 of us. So that's just my opinion.
2 points, if I may, Mayor. City manager said something. I really try hard to leave city staff out of these political discussions, because it just feels like we're dragging innocent victims into a political discussion. But something that the city manager said is that they have a meeting to ensure that the items that go onto the agenda are fully vetted before he brings them to us. All I'm asking is the public have that same opportunity before we take a vote, is that we would read the item, we would have it on the agenda, the public would have at least 2 weeks to consider it, and then if they want to make comment on it, they can. Because I'm interested in that, I am willing to table this item this evening so that we can have a work session on this particular issue, give the public more opportunity to have input before we take a vote tonight, because we would still have to take a vote on it one way or the other, and discuss the nuance of what we're actually talking about, what ordinances would be considered for second votes, or what ordinances would be considered under the new rules, what ordinances would not be considered under the new rules, and again, to give the public the exact same consideration that the city manager gives the commission, which is an opportunity to be involved and not have bits and pieces of the item, but instead have the whole item and lots of time to comment on it.
Mayor, we have a motion on the floor. Yes, I guess,
Can I say one last thing, Joe, before we table this?
okay.
Or vote to table it? One of the other things that this conversation has evolved that is really concerning to me as this is happening is the lack of consistency. So we're going to do 2 votes on these things, but we're only going to do 1 on these, and it's confusing today, as it's pointed out. We're confusing this thing greatly. So on this type of, the general public doesn't know the difference between a municipal order and an ordinance or a resolution. You'd have to really, be up here to get all that, be in city government. So I just feel like, we're going to vote twice on this, but we're going to vote once on this. We just really need to vet this a little bit more.
I think that's part of the goal, because right now we have some we're voting 2 on, and some we're voting 1 on. And so then that's part of why I think causing part of the confusion as to why people think that if it said we voted on it, then we must be voting on it. What do you mean one of your votes isn't a real vote? So I think part of this is trying to make it less complicated, where everything gets voted on once and some get 2 readings. So I think the hope is that it becomes less complicated.
So, Mayor, for clarification,
What we're voting on is the ordinance that's presented in front of us tonight, which is to not require a vote on the first reading. And that's what's on the floor.
And I make a motion to table that item.
after the, what?
Motion to table is appropriate at this point.
Oh, okay.
And I make a motion to table BG 2020-3 until we can have, at a minimum, a work session on the item.
Second.
Motion to table has been entered by Nash, second by Denning. There's no discussion on a motion to table. So again, the vote is to table the item.
You all want that work session on February 18th at the end of the regular session. Is that okay?
Wonderful.
Please call the roll.
Beasley Brown.
Yes.
Denning.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Perigin.
Yes.
Wilkerson.
Motion's been tabled, so there's no other items on the agenda. There's no one signed up for public comments, so our next scheduled meeting is February 18th.